This is Echo 3, and let's continue our modded career mode discussion. I have been doing missions with the Kerbin side remastered Giving Aircraft a Purpose mod, and I have gone ahead and improved our flight progress level all the way up so that we can start doing these national security intelligence missions. Mr. White has some tasks for us. This first one, we need to fly to this secret area 15. And we'll take a few agents there. That should be easy enough, although it is a pretty far trip, so I need a plane that is able to fly about halfway across Kerbin. So we'll go ahead and load these guys up, and we'll take off. I have been using this plane specifically for all of these flight across Kerbin missions. It can hold 8 passengers, have 2 pilots, and it has a really good range all across all of Kerbin. So I've been very happy with this specific design. And we'll just go ahead and fly to this secret base. I'll just go ahead and cut all that out. This is not a supersonic jet, but it does have really good range. So we are now somewhere on the south side of Kerbin at a classified location. And there is a secret air base here. Looks like we are cleared to land at it. We have some special clearance, I guess, security clearance to be doing these missions for Mr. White. And we'll be getting several other tasks, and that'll involve going here, moving agents around. This should be kind of some fun time here. I look forward to some of these unique missions that we can do. I like having these modded missions. Specifically, I like having a reason to fly around Kerbin. It's fun. I like making airplanes, and these mods, specifically the Giving Aircraft a Purpose and the Kerbin side remastered Giving Aircraft a Purpose mod, really give a lot of reason to fly around and do things and keep that interesting. Now we'll do one more mission here for Mr. White, and it looks like we need to move an agent from one base and take them back to the secret base there near the south side of Kerbin. So we'll go ahead and do that. I need to make a couple modifications to the plane. I needed 2 cargo areas that I wanted to add to the specific plane. The cargo area has a ramp there on the front, which will let the passenger actually climb up and get into the aircraft. It'll just make it easier without having to lower the landing gear. So I found that'll work pretty well for us. We'll go ahead and take off. Same thing. We'll land at this base. We pick up our passenger, go ahead, and we'll take off and head towards the secret base. I love how there are all these air bases now around Kerbin that I can use or have different missions to fly around to them. And there's a lot of different passenger missions. I haven't been doing them right now, but just a lot of reason to fly around. And we need to just move this agent over to this secret base, and that'll be it for this mission. Also, in the last mission, in the last video, we selected a mission to do a flyby of Gilly. So after we do this, we will build our craft for doing that. Looks like everything is okay here. Hopefully, we'll get some more missions to work for Mr. White. Looks like there's some interesting tasks that we can do for him. Now we'll head over to the vehicle assembly building and go ahead and build our flyby craft. I'm going to go ahead and use this advanced probe. It's nice because it can hold our direction towards maneuver, so it'll make some of these maneuvers a little easier to do. We'll load it up with some science equipment here. And the magnetometer. We'll have a gravioli detector, barometer, thermometer. Make sure we get an appropriate antenna. This one is just enough antenna. I have a video on how to decide what antenna to use. This one I picked here has exactly enough range, really no more. So if we're going to go any further out than Dres, then we will need a bigger antenna. But this will be sufficient for our current mission. And I'm trying to decide what engine to use. I have a lot of different engines from the Near Future mod, and I've decided to use this methane engine. Has pretty good specific impulse. Now what you don't see here is that I forget to put the parachute on. I do remember to put it on, I just forget as we are doing this. I'm going to put a parachute on top of our little probe here, and we'll turn it all the way back to Kerbin. So we'll do the flyby, but I want to get all the science, not just transmit the science. So then we'll build the rest of this. So I have my upper stage, and we'll go ahead and close this in a fairing. Then I'll build kind of the second stage for the rocket, my transfer stage. This will finish our circularization around Kerbin and eject us a good way towards Dres. And I'll use one of these hydrogen engine. It doesn't need a really high thrust to weight ratio. Actually, about 0.5 should be sufficient for this stage, because we'll be up high enough and moving fast enough from the first stage that I won't need a very high thrust to weight ratio. I won't even need one above 1. And this last engine here, looking at what it gives me, thrust to weight ratio looks pretty good. Throw on a couple fins on the bottom for stability. I'm not sure I really need it. It's a pretty aerodynamic rocket. It should be close to being stable as is. I just like to throw in a few fins, throw on a few struts, and I forget, but I do put the parachute on, so when we launch, you'll see that. Go ahead and launch this into orbit. Now, because my second stage has a lower thrust to weight ratio, it does take longer to actually get into orbit. It takes, I think, close to 4.5 minutes, really, to get this thing into orbit. But it does a really good job. It's pretty efficient craft. And I'm going to put this into a higher orbit. I think it just makes the transfer a little easier, especially if I am dealing with a lower thrust to weight ratio section. A higher orbit works well. And then my transfer burn does technically take a little less from a higher parking orbit. We are not too far from a Dres transfer window. I looked at the map earlier and noticed it was coming up. So we'll go ahead and use the maneuver planner, and we have to wait around 100 days or so. So we'll go ahead and fast forward to our maneuver and gather a little bit of science while we're in Kerbin's orbit. The maneuver did a really good job. So the tool I did find, as long as I am in a circular, not very inclined orbit, it does a good job of finding these maneuvers. Now, it can be kind of tricky because you can overburn or underburn, and the maneuver assumes an instantaneous change in velocity. And so I got close, and then I've right-clicked on my closest approach marker and am making a few adjustments here just to try and get a very close flyby of Dres. I think I probably should have set up an even closer one, but I wasn't positive how good of a connection I was going to get when I did my flyby with my CurbNet there, or with my ComNet. And I wanted to make sure that I wouldn't have to do any further maneuvers when I was in Dres's sphere of influence. So by setting this up entirely here, I didn't have to worry about a great ComNet connection. And we'll just go ahead and jump out to Dres's sphere of influence and go ahead and gather the science there. I did not get down to low space. I needed to get just a little lower. I failed to look at the wiki to realize that I was not going to get quite low enough. I knew I was close. I just thought I had the numbers on the top of my head. So you do need to get lower than 25,000 meters in order to get into low space of Dres. So I do get a pretty close flyby, and it makes for some wonderful shots here, but I don't actually get any low space science from this. But on the plus side, I set this entire flyby up while I was in Kerbin's sphere of influence, which can be really handy if you are unsure about your ComNet connections. we do get quite a bit of science out of this mission. We'll get probably a little more than 1,000 science out of this mission. Now I'm going to go here to my apoapsis and make a small adjustment. Make sure that my periapsis touches Kerbin's orbit. So I'm trying to make sure I have the same altitude above the sun as Kerbin. And then at my periapsis, I will make a maneuver and try to get an encounter with Kerbin. And it looks like I'm not going to have to spend a lot of delta V to make this happen. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we got a pretty close encounter with Kerbin. So we'll make probably one more correction and set us up to get basically right next to Kerbin. I'd like to slow down with the remainder of my delta V, just make sure that my craft stays intact. I don't want to lose all of this wonderful science. So looks like we will have enough to get back into orbit around Kerbin. Not that I entirely have to, but I want to make sure that I don't overburn my craft, that I don't come in too fast or anything and destroy something. So I'll just go ahead and slow down. I've pulled up the trajectories mod. I'd like to land close to the Kerbal Space Center. I figure, we're returning all the science. It'd be a shame if my Kerbals had to walk to the other side of the planet or something. So we'll try and land pretty close to the Space Center. Although it's a little tricky to set this up because it's doing the prediction assuming I have the engine section on, and I'll be decoupling that and using the heat shield to land, and so I know that it won't be exact, but it will get me pretty close, and it looks like we are going to land at least on the same continent as the Space Center, so that looks pretty good. I am Echo 3. Thanks for joining me on this career mode discussion. I will hopefully see you soon. Until next time, have a good Christmas.